Some nights feel as if the world has lowered its voice on purpose. Out beyond the last streetlights where Luxor turns from warm stone and palm shade into open sand, the air becomes softer, thinner, and strangely kind. The desert does not rush you, it simply waits, patient as an old friend, while the sky gathers its stars one by one like quiet beads on an unseen string. Wherever you are listening from tonight, maybe a small apartment with the hum of a refrigerator, maybe a house with the soft creak of settling wood, maybe a hotel room that still smells faintly of laundry detergent, let this be a gentle permission slip. You do not need to solve anything right now. Let your jaw unclench by one small degree. Let your shoulders drift down as if a warm hand has reminded them they can rest. Take a slow breath in and let it out the way a candle lets out light, steadily, without effort. Tonight, our story is not a chase. It is a slow walk with a lantern. We will wander in imagination to the west bank of the Nile, to the limestone folds of the Valley of the Kings. Not to be frightened by hidden traps or shouted mysteries, but to notice what is quiet, what is crafted, what is tender. We will listen to history the way you listen to distant rain, not for the words, but for the steady rhythm that makes your thoughts soften. Before we drift deeper into tonight's gentle journey, remember to subscribe to Ancient Sleep Story. Here, you'll always find peaceful stories that soothe the heart and quiet the mind. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment. Your presence adds warmth to this quiet corner of the night. And if we only select the beautiful and subtle details, would you want to listen to them like the sound of distant rain? Here, no one rests alone. Every story from the past is a soft lantern in the dark, gently lighting our way tonight. Imagine the Nile at night. Not the postcard Nile, bright and loud, but the real river after the day has used up its heat. The surface turns dark as polished stone, and the reflections of lamps along the bank stretch into long, trembling ribbons. A small boat moves without hurry, the oars dipping in with a soft, repeating sigh. Each dip is a lullaby, each pull is a slow sentence. On the far side, the land rises, the green of gardens and date palms thins out, and the desert begins, quietly at first, as if it doesn't want to startle you. Then the hills take on that pale, honeyed color that limestone holds, even in darkness. The Valley of the Kings is there, folded between cliffs like a secret kept for the sake of silence. In this valley, you can almost feel the temperature change when you step from moonlight into shadow. Outside, the air is warm and dry. Inside, near the cutstone, there is a coolness that feels clean. It moves across your skin like a calm hand. The walls, when lantern light touches them, glow in a muted sandy gold, nothing harsh, nothing glossy. The valley is a corridor of quiet, and your footsteps, even imagined, become careful out of respect. And somewhere in this landscape, near the place we call the tomb of Tutankhamun, there are new, small surprises waiting in the sand. Picture a morning here, not bright, but gentle, when the sun is still low and the shadows are long and patient. A team of archaeologists works in that slow, respectful way that belongs to people who know they are guests. Brushes move in small arcs. Fingers lift grit from carved edges as if waking someone without startling them. The sounds are ordinary, a soft scrape, a murmur, a canteen cap clicking, the distant call of a bird that has decided to sing in a place made mostly of stone. Not far from the most famous tomb in the valley, they find something that does not shout for attention. It is not a grand doorway framed by statues. It is not a golden blaze. It is a cluster. Wooden coffins resting close together like a quiet gathering. Time has folded over them for more than 3,000 years, and the desert has done what it often does best. It has covered, protected, and kept. There is something oddly comforting about that image, about the idea that history is not only the story of the most famous names, but also the story of the ones who rested nearby, in the same earth, under the same sun, under the same night sky. You might notice how your mind responds differently to this than it would to a thriller. No trapdoors, no rushing heartbeat. Just the gentle fact of people once living, now resting, and being found with care. And among the objects left behind, objects that were never meant to become museum lights and book pages, there are small pieces of beauty that feel like they could belong to any era, including ours. A necklace, for example. Not the kind that tries to impress from across a room, but the kind you discover when you are close enough to see each bead. 30 beads of amethyst, deep purple, like a twilight that never fully becomes night. A couple of beads of agate, warm and earthy, as if the desert lent them a little of its own patience. And a tiny amulet shaped like a hippopotamus head, small enough to fit in the curve of a palm, yet confident in its presence. If you pause with that image, you might feel it, the quiet continuity of human life. Someone once chose those beads. Someone once liked the feel of them sliding between fingertips. Someone once fastened that necklace and felt, for a moment, more themselves, more protected, more beautiful, more ready for the day. Women, men, the young, the old, across time, across languages, people have always reached for small comforts. A piece of jewelry, a scent of oil on the wrist, a ribbon, a polished stone. These are not trivial details. They are the soft fabric of living. And then there are the mirrors, not bright modern glass, but copper. 2 hand mirrors that hold the memory of flame and sun. One has a handle shaped like a lotus, the flower that opens again and again, even after darkness. The other is decorated with Hathor, the gentle goddess of sky and love, a face that seems to promise tenderness rather than judgment. Copper does not reflect the world with sharp honesty. It reflects with warmth. It takes the edges off. It makes everything a little softer, as if the mirror itself is whispering, "It's all right." You can look gently. If you imagine those mirrors in the lamplight of an ancient room, you can almost see the glow sliding over their surfaces, like a small river of gold. You can almost hear the hush of linen, the soft footstep, the quiet breath of someone preparing, not for drama, but for continuation, for a journey they believed would go on beyond the last exhale. This is where our story begins its rail, the steady track we will follow tonight, not with a loud mystery, but with small, beautiful objects, because sometimes the safest way to travel through the past is to hold something small, a bead, a mirror, a charm, and let those simple things lead you deeper without pulling you. Now, as the morning in the valley warms, our imagination drifts like sand carried by a mild breeze from the dig site to another kind of quiet place, a museum. You can picture the room without trying too hard. Dim lights, soft footsteps, glass cases that shine faintly, and a hush that feels almost like a chapel. There are objects arranged with distance around them, not because they are cold, but because we have learned to approach certain things with reverence. And somewhere in that museum there is a face you have seen before, a gold mask resting behind glass, lit in such a careful way that the light seems to move like water. It is famous, yes, it is iconic. It has become, for many people, the symbol of a whole civilization. But tonight we are not here for the symbol, we are here for the detail. When you come close, closer than posters, closer than documentaries, you notice something so small it almost feels like a secret the mask kept until you were calm enough to see it. tiny holes, pierced ears. It is such a human thing, isn't it? Such a gentle, intimate choice. And in ancient Egypt, pierced ears often speak quietly of certain meanings: status, youth, femininity, ceremony, threads that tie a person to a particular chapter of life. And so, without any panic, without any sharp twist, a soft curiosity opens in you like a lotus in slow motion. Why would a king's mask have earrings? Was the mask made when he was still very young, when earrings might have been worn? Or was it meant for someone else entirely? Someone who carried royal power in a different way, in a different body, in a different story? The desert, remember, keeps its lanterns. Sometimes it keeps them in sand, sometimes it keeps them in stone. Sometimes it keeps them in a detail so small you could overlook it for a century. If your eyelids feel heavier now, that's fine. You can let them relax. You can listen without trying to hold every fact. All you need to keep is the feeling. A slow boat on dark water, a valley of limestone quiet, a necklace of purple beads, 2 copper mirrors catching a gentle glow, and a gold face with ears that have been pierced like a whispered secret. In the next part of our journey, we will follow that whisper, carefully, kindly, into the workshop rhythms of ancient hands, into the way gold is shaped with heat and patience, and into a deeper idea the Egyptians held close, that a name, spoken with care, can be a kind of life. Let the sand settle in your mind as softly as breath settling into sleep. Let us return gently to the valley. If you imagine the desert again, notice how it does not glitter the way movies sometimes insist it should. At night, it is mostly madder, pale ridges, quiet slopes, and the soft, dry breath of wind that never truly becomes a storm. The cliffs are there like sleeping animals, massive, still, and unbothered by human time. And then, as if the earth has opened a small, careful mouth, you find the entrance. A set of steps leading down, not dramatic, not grand, just practical stone cut into the hillside, worn at the edges the way any threshold becomes worn when many feet have passed, even if those feet belong to people who lived 3,000 years ago. As you descend, slowly, with the pace of a calm heartbeat, the air changes first. It grows cooler, not cold, just cool in that clean, mineral way. It carries a faint scent of limestone and dust, like an old book that has been closed for a long time. Your skin feels it immediately, the way skin notices shade after a long day in sun. If you like, let your own breath follow that change. In and out, as if your lungs too have stepped from heat into shelter. Inside, the soundscape becomes small. Footsteps soften. Voices, if there are any at all, become murmurs. The world above, cars, headlines, notifications, feels very far away, like a town you once lived in, now only remembered in certain dreams. And on the walls there are lines, not just lines as decoration, but lines as language, as prayer, as a way to hold on to what matters. Hieroglyphs curve and stand and lean, each one a tiny picture carrying meaning, a bird, a reed, a hand, a ripple of water. They are not meant to be read quickly, they are meant to be seen slowly, the way you watch a river move when you have nowhere else to be. Somewhere in the imagination of this corridor, 2 figures keep watch, Isis and Nephthys, sisters, guardians, gentle presences in the Egyptian story of protection and passage. Sometimes they are painted with wings outstretched, not to trap you, but to cover you, to make a roof of tenderness. You may not believe in gods the way ancient people did, and that is perfectly fine. Tonight, we are not asking you to believe. We are simply borrowing their image as a kind of reassurance. Even in the deep places of the earth, there can be symbols of care. Even in the chambers meant for the dead, there can be a feeling of being held. If your mind has been busy today, if it has been running in circles like a small animal looking for a safe corner, let those painted wings be your safe corner for a moment. Now drift with me back to a different night in a different century. The year is 1922, and the air in the valley is already cooling after the day's heat. There are lanterns and ropes and quiet preparations. Howard Carter is there, but we will not paint him as a hero or a villain tonight. He is simply a man with patience and dust in his hair, stepping toward a door that the desert has kept quiet. The door is not shining, it is not announcing itself. It has been hidden beneath rubble and the ordinary leftovers of building, chips of stone, bits of plaster, layers of sand, like a blanket that time pulled up over something fragile. Carter does not run, he does not shout. He brushes and he waits, and he listens to the small sounds of his own work, the scrape of a tool, the fall of grit, the hush between breaths. When a sealed doorway finally appears, it is like seeing the spine of a book in a dark library, an invitation but not a demand. And when the opening is made, the first glimpse inside is not a burst of gold, it is space, still air. Darkness that has been undisturbed for a very long time. Carter famously spoke of wonderful things, but even that phrase tonight can be softened. Not wonderful as in fireworks, wonderful as in quiet gratitude, as in the feeling you get when you find an old photograph and realize the person in it once laughed, once ate bread, once touched someone's shoulder with affection. As the tomb is revealed, it becomes less like a crime scene and more like a room someone prepared with care. Objects are arranged. Wood and linen and stone sit in their places with a kind of sleepy dignity. Nothing is rushing. Nothing is trying to scare you. And among these objects, your attention, like a lantern beam, can move slowly from one to the next. A small amulet, a carved headrest, a game board with pieces that feel almost warm in imagination. Because hands once held them the way you hold a mug when you need comfort. Then later, the mask, not as a headline, but as a face. Gold, yes, but also gentleness, cheeks that curve softly, eyes shaped with calm, lips closed as if keeping a thoughtful secret. The mask does not grin, it does not threaten, it rests. And you remember the small detail, the pierced ears. A soft question rises, not sharp enough to wake you, only curious enough to keep the story moving on its rails. Who was this made for? Sometimes historians suggest that parts of the burial equipment might have been adapted, repurposed, adjusted, because death does not always arrive on schedule, and even kings are still human. Sometimes the past is not perfectly planned. Sometimes it is improvisation wrapped in ceremony, and there is something strangely comforting in that too. Because your life and mine and everyone's life is full of gentle adjustments, we do the best we can, we mend what needs mending, we make something work with the tools we have. In the modern world, the mask is cared for with different tools. Not incense and ritual, but gloves and climate controls and scanners that hum softly like a sleeping appliance. In conservation rooms, people speak in low tones and move with the same slow respect the ancient embalmers might have understood. And when they want to know how something was made, how it is holding together after millennia, they do not pry with violence. They do not force. They use light, and they use time, X-rays, CT scans, gentle imaging that looks through surfaces the way moonlight looks through thin clouds, revealing shapes without tearing anything open. Imagine the mask lying quietly, supported, while a ring of technology moves around it. The machine does not feel like a threat in this telling. It feels like a soft question asked with humility, and the answers come back as patterns, layers, joins, tiny choices made by ancient hands. One of the calm discoveries is this: the gold is not perfectly pure. Pure gold is soft, too soft in a way. Beautiful, yes, but easily bent, easily marked. The artisans of ancient Egypt understood this with their fingertips. They knew that a small addition, perhaps a little copper, perhaps a little silver, could give the metal strength, could make it hold a shape more faithfully. So the gold becomes an alloy, a blend, a quiet cooperation between elements. And that too can be a gentle lesson. Sometimes what makes something lasting is not purity but balance. Not one thing alone, but a careful mixture. In a workshop long gone, you can imagine the rhythm: heat, then hammer, then heat again. The sound would not be loud like a modern factory. It would be a steady tapping, like rain against a clay roof. A worker pauses to feel the surface with fingertips. Another worker adjusts the angle of a tool. Someone stirs charcoal. Someone watches color. The soft red glow that means the metal is ready to be shaped again. This is not the violence of conquest, this is the patience of craft. And inside the mask, another secret reveals itself, the kind that only quiet attention can appreciate. There are internal structures, small supports and joins, designed to hold the pieces together. The beard, for instance, is not merely stuck on as decoration. It is fitted with care, with an understanding that weight and time will test every connection. We will picture it as a reminder that even precious things sometimes need restoration, that a calm hand can fix what time has loosened, that patience can return steadiness. If you have ever repaired something late at night, quietly, so you wouldn't wake anyone, then you already know this feeling. A careful touch, a slow breath, a tiny adjustment that makes everything sit right again. And now, as our lantern moves from workshop to museum, from ancient hammering to modern scanning, the story begins to open a second door. One that is not in the Valley of the Kings, but further south, in a place called Abydos. Abydos is older in some ways and quieter in its own way, a sacred landscape where pilgrims once walked, as if every step were a prayer. Sand stretches there too, and the temples keep their shadows. In that region, archaeologists have found hints of royal burials that do not have clear names attached, as if history left a space blank on purpose. A blank page, a softened mystery, not to frighten you, only to invite you to keep walking one calm step at a time. Because soon we will speak about what the Egyptians cared about perhaps most of all, the idea that to be named gently, correctly, with warmth, was to be kept alive in the world. And if you are listening tonight with a tired heart, that thought may feel like a small lantern of its own. For now, let the corridor cool your thoughts. Let the painted wings of Isis and Nephthys rest over you like a quiet blanket. Let the gold be less a symbol of power and more a memory of patient hands tonight. In and out, like distant rain, like the Nile, moving in darkness without hurry. And when you are ready, we will take the next gentle step. The valley can feel like a bowl of stone holding silence. Even when daylight returns, it returns gently here. It spills over the ridges in slow layers, warming the pale cliffs, waking the sand grain by grain. If you listen closely, you might imagine the softest hiss of heat rising, like a kettle that never reaches a boil. And yet what we are following tonight is not only a place, it is a movement, because the objects that slept in the Valley of the Kings did not remain there forever. Some were carried out with gloved hands, some were wrapped, catalogued, cradled in padded trays. Some traveled down the winding road toward the river, then onward into rooms with steady temperature and careful light. It is strange in a tender way to think of ancient things traveling. You can picture the journey itself. A wooden crate lined with padding, the way you might line a drawer with cloth so something delicate won't rattle. Paper tags tied with string, inked with careful handwriting. Numbers that look plain but carry a promise. We will not lose you. We will know where you are. Outside, the day leans toward dusk. A truck moves slowly along the road, tires humming over gravel as slowly as moonlight. In the back, the crate does not bounce much. It is steadied, watched, treated like a sleeping child. When the road reaches the Nile, there is water again, darkening, cooling, reflecting the first stars. Maybe, in another time, a boat would have carried these things drifting across the river with a lantern at the bow. Imagine the lantern light touching the crate, the way it once touched limestone walls. The oars dip. The river answers with a soft slap and a sigh, and in that slow crossing, there is a feeling that the past is not being stolen. It is being escorted so that more eyes, more quiet evenings like this one, can meet it with respect. Have you ever carried something fragile through your own life? An old letter, a family photograph, a keepsake wrapped in tissue paper, moving carefully, breathing gently, as if your calm could protect it? If you picture a museum again, let it be late evening. The building is closed. The last visitors have gone home. The halls are dim, and the security lights make long, calm rectangles on the floor. A guard's footsteps echo softly, then fade. Somewhere, an air system breathes in and out, a steady mechanical lullaby. In a conservation room behind the exhibit halls, a small object rests on a foam support. A necklace, 30 amethyst beads deep as twilight, 2 warm beads of agate, a little hippopotamus amulet, sturdy and small. Nothing about it needs to shout. It does not need to be a treasure in the dramatic sense. It is simply a personal thing that survived. And when you look at it, really look, you may notice how your attention slows down on its own. Your mind stops hopping from thought to thought and begins to do what it was built to do, to notice patterns, to savor detail, to feel safe in the steadiness of repetition, bead after bead after bead, a rhythm. If you like, let that rhythm match your breathing for a moment. In, bead, out, bead. In, bead, out, bead. Sometimes the simplest patterns are the most calming, because they remind the nervous system you can stop scanning for danger, you can rest your eyes. Nearby, another object waits, one of those copper mirrors. Even in dim light, copper remembers the sun. It holds warmth in its color. It reflects not with sharpness, but with mercy, as if every face deserves to be softened at the edges. You might imagine the mirror in an ancient hand, someone lifting it carefully, angling it toward a flame, watching the glow slide across their cheekbones. Maybe they were preparing for a ceremony. Maybe they were simply preparing for themselves, the way you might brush your hair before bed, not to impress anyone, but to feel settled. It is easy to forget in our modern rush that history is made of ordinary evenings. Somewhere in that tomb, a person once yawned. Someone once rubbed sleep from their eyes. Someone once whispered to another person in the dark and was answered softly. The desert kept the grand things, yes, but it also kept the small ones, and the small ones are often where you can feel the heartbeat of a real life. In the same room, another tray holds game pieces, ivory, wood, stone, little shapes that fit into a palm. Perhaps they belonged to a board game like Sonnet, a game of movement and chance, a game that could be played in the shade while the Nile moved nearby. If you have ever played a game late at night, quietly, with someone you care about, you might recognize the feeling. The world outside feels far away. The only universe that matters is the soft click of pieces, the shared patience, the gentle teasing, the warmth of companionship. And then, without warning and without alarm, your mind may make a small leap. As these objects were meant to travel, weren't they? Not across oceans, not into museums, but into the next life, into the unknown road the Egyptians imagined after death. A mirror to carry light, a necklace to carry beauty and protection, a game to carry the comfort of familiar ritual. In that sense, they were packed like a traveler packs a bag, not only with what is necessary, but with what is soothing, what is beloved. And now, in our time, they travel again, into glass cases, into books, into the quiet space of your listening. It is a gentle loop of care, then care now. As you float with this thought, let us open a second soft discovery, one that is less famous than the golden mask, but perhaps even more intimate. There was a coffin found near Tutankhamun's burial, belonging to a woman whose name can be spoken like a whisper, Lady Shenet Aya. Her coffin, from what conservators have described, was unusual. It did not have an obvious opening. No clear seam, no simple lid to lift. It was shaped to the body with such closeness that it was like clothing made of wood, like a tailored casing, a careful shell. You might imagine the artisans who made it. They would have selected wood, shaped it, smoothed it with tools and patience. They would have measured and adjusted. They would have wanted it to fit just so, not for vanity, but for protection, for steadiness, for safekeeping. And then when the modern world met this coffin, it met a puzzle that did not feel hostile, only careful. How do you open something that was designed not to open easily? The answer was not force. The answer was gentleness, humidity. In conservation, there is a method that feels almost like giving breath back to dry things. Moisture, controlled and slow, can soften ancient materials just enough that they relax, just enough that hidden seams reveal themselves like sleepy eyes. Imagine the scene, a room that is quiet, lit softly. People in gloves move with the calm precision of nurses, a subtle mist, not visible, but present, like the air after a light rain. Hours pass, maybe days, no one rushes. And then gradually, the coffin yields, not as if surrendering, but as if agreeing, as if it is saying, all right, if you are kind, I will show you. It is a discovery, yes, but it is the kind of discovery that invites your shoulders to drop because it is about care, not conquest. There is something deeply human in that. Because so many things in us also open only with gentleness. A tired heart, a guarded memory, a grief that has dried hard around the edges. You cannot pry them open with noise. You soften them with patience, with warmth, with time. If tonight you are carrying something that feels sealed, some worry you can't quite name, some heaviness that followed you home, let the image of this slow humidity be a quiet metaphor. You do not need to break anything to heal. You can soften, you can wait, you can allow. And as you allow, the past continues to offer its quiet lessons. The Egyptians were not only preparing a body, they were preparing a passage. They believed in layers of protection, amulets placed on the chest, words painted on linen, spells written not as threats, but as guidance. The tomb was not simply a storage room. It was a carefully arranged map, a map made of objects and words and names. And that brings us gently to the next lantern we will carry, the idea of the name. In ancient Egypt, a name was not just a label, it was a thread, it was a living thing. To speak a name was to keep someone present, like touching a pulse. They had a word for this. Ren. A person's Ren was precious because as long as it was remembered, as long as it was spoken, some part of them continued quietly, warmly through time. If you pause and feel your own name in your mind, notice what happens. A small sense of self gathers, a boundary forms, gentle but real. Your name is like a soft lamp inside you. And now here is the calm cliffhanger of tonight's corridor. What happens when a name is hidden? When it is erased? When it is swapped, replaced, or written over like paint over an older scene? In the next part, we will follow the wren through stone and gold, through scratches and restorations, through the way time both buries and preserves. For now, let the museum lights dim in your imagination, let the beads settle, let the copper mirror reflect only softness. Let Lady Chenette's coffin close again, not in fear, but in peace. And if your eyes want to close, you can let them. The story will keep walking, slowly, even if you drift. Somewhere above the valley the stars keep turning, and your breath can turn with them. Slower, softer, safe tonight too. If you could walk through the museum after midnight, when the last footsteps have gone and the doors have settled into their locks, you might notice something unexpected. Not the silence, because silence is what you would expect. The unexpected thing is how alive the past can feel when no one is trying to perform it. Under the low security lights, the glass cases become gentle pools of reflection. The gold does not shout, the stone does not pose, the objects simply rest in their own patient presence, as if they are breathing in a slow, ancient rhythm that has never needed an audience. In this quiet, there is a word that begins to glow, softly, like a lantern turned low. Wren. In ancient Egypt, a person was not only a body, not only a soul, not only a story. A person was also a name. The name was a living strand of identity, something that could be carried, spoken, protected. To be named was to be held in the world. To be remembered was to continue, even when the body had long returned to dust. It is a gentle concept, and it does not require any superstition to feel its truth. Think of the way you feel when someone says your name with kindness. It is as if a small door inside you opens. You are seen. You are here. And now, think of the opposite, the way it feels when you are overlooked, when your name is forgotten, when you are reduced to hey or you, as if you have become a blur at the edge of the room. Even in the modern world, names matter. They are small anchors in the storm of time. For the Egyptians, the wren was one of the most precious anchors of all. This is why names appear everywhere in their art and burial practices, carved into stone, painted onto wood, written on linen pressed into amulets. Names are placed inside cartouches, oval frames that look like loops of rope, as if the name itself is being gently enclosed and protected. If you picture the tomb corridor again, you can imagine your lantern light skimming over a cartouche. The hieroglyphs inside are calm and deliberate, each sign chosen with care. A reed, a chick, a sun disk, a line of water, not merely decoration, identity made visible. And yet, history is not always gentle with names. Sometimes names are damaged by accident. A wall crumbles, a flood comes, a tool slips. But sometimes names are removed on purpose, chiseled away, painted over, replaced. Not with the drama of a movie villain, but with the quiet politics of human life. Shifts in power, changes in belief, new rulers trying to rewrite what came before. The soft discovery tonight is this: even when a name is altered, the traces often remain, like a memory that refuses to disappear completely. Imagine an artisan in a workshop centuries ago, holding a small tool, a gentle tapping, a careful scraping. They are not destroying the whole image, only changing the signs inside the cartouche. A few strokes removed, a few new strokes added. The face remains, the gold remains, but the name, the wren, has been nudged, redirected. If you let your mind linger here, you may feel the strange tenderness of it, because it tells us that people have always been afraid of forgetting and being forgotten. They have always tried, in clumsy human ways, to control how memory works. And yet memory is resilient, even in stone, even in gold, even in sand. Sometimes, in the quiet corners of inscriptions, you can see where the stone was smoothed and recarved like a shoreline reshaped by patient waves. The newer signs may sit a little shallower, and the surface around them carries faint tool marks, as the way a well-loved table holds the memory of many hands. Scholars notice these subtleties the way you might notice a repaired seam in an old sweater, not as a flaw, but as proof of being lived with and tended. And there is another way names survive: through voice. Long before museum labels and printed books, names were carried by people who walked barefoot on cool temple floors. In a place like Abydos, pilgrims came in slow lines, bringing simple offerings: bread, a small cup, a string of flowers. They would stand before carved walls and speak names as if speaking were a bridge. A priest might recite a lineage not to impress, but to keep the thread unbroken, to make sure the living and the dead remained connected in the same warm circle of belonging. If you imagine that recitation, hear it as a low chant, steady and soothing. Each name arrives, pauses, and drifts away like a boat passing under moonlight. You can do something similar tonight. Without effort, think of one name that brings you comfort. Someone gentle, someone safe. You do not need to contact them. Just let the name glow softly in your mind for a moment, like a small candle. Then if it feels right, let your own name rest beside it. Both of them quiet, both of them held, in the calm dark of night. Back in the museum there is the mask again, resting behind glass like a calm moon. The pierced ears are still there, small and patient. The surface is smooth, but under modern scanning, the joins and seams reveal themselves, places where different pieces meet, places where hands made choices, places where time invited adjustments. You do not have to decide the perfect answer to the question of who it was first made for. Tonight, that is not our job. Tonight, we simply notice how the question opens a door into the nature of identity. A face can be famous, but a name is intimate. A name is what a mother whispers. A name is what a friend calls across a room. A name is what you write on a birthday card when you want someone to feel held. In the ancient world, when someone prepared a burial, they were not only preparing a body to last, they were preparing a name to endure. Small figurines called ushabti were placed in tombs, tiny servants meant to help in the next life. Each one could carry inscriptions, sometimes including the name of the one they served, as if even the helpers needed to know who they belonged to. Can you see them in your mind? Row after row of small figures, blue-green like river water under moonlight, their faces serene, their hands crossed as if resting, their names written in careful lines, a quiet army of remembrance. And then there are the amulets, tiny pieces of protection, each with a symbolic purpose, a heart scarab placed over the chest, the eye of Horus for healing and wholeness, the Ankh for life, the Jed pillar for stability. These are not meant to frighten you, they are meant to soothe. They are the ancient version of what we still do today when we carry something small, a lucky coin, a ring, a photo tucked in a wallet, a note folded in a pocket. We hold the physical to comfort the invisible. Now bring your attention back to the idea of the wren one more time. The Egyptians believed that speaking a name was a way of feeding it, the way you might feed a candle with oxygen. The flame stays alive because you have not smothered it. You have allowed it to breathe. And this is where our story becomes quietly personal. because in your own life you have Ren too, not in hieroglyphs perhaps, but in the way you have been remembered by others. Maybe someone once said your name with gratitude. Maybe someone still does. Maybe you have not heard it in a while, and your heart feels a little thirsty for that kind of recognition. If that is true tonight, let this be a soft reassurance. You do not need a monument to be real. Sometimes a single gentle memory is enough. Sometimes being held in one person's mind is a kind of immortality. In the valley, the desert covered doors with rubble as if tucking them in. In the museum, the glass cases hold objects with climate-controlled air as if giving them a steady breath. In both places, the same intention hums beneath the surface: preservation. And preservation is not only for kings, it is also for the small lives that brushed past the kings, the craftspeople, the attendants, the families, the unnamed ones whose hands made beauty and whose names were not carved in gold. If you listen closely, you might feel that history is full of quiet lanterns, not only the bright ones. Now I want to offer you a simple image, one you can keep as your thoughts begin to slow. Imagine a cartouche drawn in the air above your pillow, an oval loop like a soft ring of rope. Inside, instead of hieroglyphs, imagine gentle light, your own sense of self, warm and steady, not your worries, not your tasks. Just the quiet fact that you are here. Let the loop protect that light. Let your breath move through it like a breeze through reeds, in and out. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. And if your mind is still holding on to the day, you can release it one small piece at a time, like setting down beads from a necklace, one by one, until your hands are empty and your chest feels lighter. In the next part, we will return to the valley itself, to the way the land holds layers. Sacred sites built over older sacred sites, footsteps laid over older footsteps, names spoken, forgotten, and spoken again. We will let the sand teach us the kind of time that does not hurry. For now, you can rest with the thought that the past is not only a story of power, it is also a story of care. And in that care, your own tired mind can find a place to soften, to be named gently by the night, and to drift. There is a kind of silence that belongs to places where many people have whispered. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of layers, like soft fabric laid one over another, year after year, until the air itself seems padded and gentle. Abydos is that kind of place. If the Valley of the Kings feels like a cool corridor cut into stone, Abydos feels like an open breath held in sand. The horizon there is wide, almost tender in its simplicity. The ground is pale and dry, with the faintest shimmer where heat lingers, and the sky seems to sit a little closer, as if it wants to listen. Tonight, in imagination, we arrive not as tourists and not as hunters of secrets, but as quiet walkers. Our steps are unhurried. We do not need to cover ground. We only need to be present, the way you are present, when you watch a porch light glow in the rain. The wind at Abydos is softer than you might expect. It doesn't claw, it brushes. It moves along the edges of stone, over the worn backs of carved blocks, over the faint lines that once held bright paint. It carries the desert's habit of smoothing everything without erasing it completely. If you are listening in bed, let your own room become part of this landscape. Feel how still your pillow is, how the air around you doesn't ask for anything, how your breath can move through you like a slow tide, in and out. At Abydos, people once came from far away, not in rush, but in rhythm. Pilgrims walked with small offerings, bread, a cup, a simple flower, because they believed this place was connected to Osiris, the one associated with renewal and the gentle promise that endings are not only endings. You do not have to take the belief literally to feel the comfort of the gesture. There is something deeply soothing about the human impulse to bring a small gift to a place that feels meaningful. It is the same impulse that makes you light a candle, fold a blanket neatly, leave a note for someone you love. It is a way of saying, I was here, and I came in peace. Over centuries, Abydos became a layered book. Dynasties rose and fell, and each one added a chapter. Temples were built, repaired, extended. Walls were carved, smoothed, and carved again. Names appeared in crisp signs, then softened under wind and time, like handwriting left in the sun. And here is the gentle truth archaeology keeps teaching us. Time is not a single straight line. Time is a stack. One life rests on top of another life. One prayer rests on top of another prayer. One footstep presses into sand, and later another footstep presses into the same place, almost matching it, as if the earth is remembering a path. If you could stand very still near the ancient ground, still enough to hear your own heartbeat, you might imagine those footsteps as a quiet pulse in the sand, not loud, not urgent, just steady. When modern archaeologists work at Abydos, they move through these layers with care. They do not tear the book open. They turn pages slowly. A shallow layer is lifted, then another, each one holding a different texture of time. Sometimes what they find is not gold, not spectacle, but evidence of daily life. A broken pot, a bead, a small seal impression. The kinds of objects that remind us that even in sacred places, people were still people. They ate, they carried water, they adjusted their sandals, they shaded their eyes and looked up at the same sky. And sometimes, in the deeper layers, the earth offers something that feels like a soft door. An early royal burial, a tomb whose owner is not announced with certainty, a name that arrives like a half-remembered melody. This is where our story's curiosity becomes very gentle, almost like sleep itself. A drifting question rather than a sharp hook. Imagine a burial chamber that is simple compared to later extravagance. Mud brick, worn wood, earth packed close. The air is dry and the scent is faintly mineral, like warm stone after sunset. In this chamber, the idea of kingship is not yet the polished icon it will become. It is still human-sized, still close to the ground. And in that closeness, there is something soothing, because the more we learn about ancient Egypt, the more we realize it was not made only of grand monuments. It was also made of transitions, of experimentation, of hands figuring out how to build a world that could hold both mystery and ordinary life. At Abydos, some places carry a feeling of firstness. Early dynastic kings were associated with this ground, and later people returned again and again, wanting to touch the origin, wanting to stand where beginnings once stood. It is like revisiting your childhood street, not to recreate it perfectly, but to feel the shape of where you started. And if you listen closely, you may notice how that speaks to you, because your own life has layers too. You have earlier versions of yourself beneath the surface, versions that still exist in quiet ways, in habits, in tastes, in the way certain songs can soften you instantly. Sometimes you are not even aware of those layers until something brushes them. An old photograph, a familiar smell, the sound of rain at night. That is not weakness. That is richness. A layered self is a resilient self. Now let us carry our lantern through one of Abydos's most tender images, a processional path. You can picture it as a stretch of ground where people once walked slowly, perhaps at dusk. The sky would have turned from pale gold to blue-grey. The wind would have cooled, taking the sharpness out of the day. Someone might have carried a small lamp, its flame protected by a clay cup, the light moving softly with each step. Along the path, there may have been murmured names, not shouted, not announced, just spoken as offerings, the wren again. In this place, names are not only carved, they are breathed, and that brings us to a second soft discovery. In some ancient traditions there were lists, king lists, temple inscriptions, that tried to gather the names of rulers into a steady sequence, as if saying, here is the thread, here is how we remember. But lists are human things. They include, they exclude, they smooth over the messy edges of real life. At night, the ruins at Abydos do not feel abandoned. They feel attended by wind, by moonlight, by the slow watch of the desert. You might imagine sitting on a low stone, letting your palms rest on your knees. The surface beneath you is cool, and the air has that dry clarity that makes every sound distinct. A far-off dog, a soft flutter of a bird settling, the tiniest tick of sand sliding down a block. In the distance, the Nile is not visible, but you can sense its presence the way you sense a loved one in the next room. Somewhere, perhaps, a caretaker's lantern moves, a small amber dot that pauses then continues. And you realize that even here, among names half lost and walls half worn, there is a quiet feeling of safety, as if the place itself is saying, take your time. Nothing demands your attention. Everything invites your body to loosen further. So when we find a blank space or a damaged name or a ruler whose story is uncertain, it is not a failure of history. It is a reminder that memory is alive and living things are never perfectly tidy. This can be a comfort. Because you do not have to have your own story perfectly tidy in order to be worthy of peace, and you can have missing chapters, you can have rough drafts, you can have parts of yourself that you are still rewriting, and you can still rest. If you want, take a slow breath and let that permission settle. In, out. Now look again at the sand. Sand is made of countless small grains, each one a fragment of something older. Stone broken down patiently by wind and time. In the desert, a single grain seems insignificant, but together grains become dunes and dunes become landscapes. They shift, yes, but they also shelter. They cover doors, they wrap ruins in a quiet blanket, they keep things from the harshness of constant exposure. Time does something similar. It shifts your days, it rearranges your memories, but it also shelters you. It gives distance to what hurt. It gives softness to what once felt sharp. And if you let it, it can cover the noisy parts of life, just enough that you can breathe again. At Abydos, you may imagine the temple stones cooling at night, a faint scent of dust, a few stars appearing in the high dark, the carved reliefs becoming harder to see, not because they have vanished, but because they are settling into shadow, like a story lowering its voice. This is the mood we carry back toward the objects we began with, because soon we will return to gold again, not as treasure, but as craft. We will sit quietly in the imagined workshop where the mask was shaped. We will listen to the slow rhythm of hammering. We will watch the glow of heated metal and the careful hands that knew how to make something both strong and gentle. And we will ask a calm question. If an ancient artisan could shape gold with patience, what might you be shaping in your own life without noticing, through the simple act of breathing, resting, and letting yourself be held by the night? And while you listen, let your thoughts settle like fine dust until only calm remains warm and steady inside. For now, let Abydos remain behind your eyelids like a wide, quiet horizon. Let the layered ground remind you that you do not need to hurry through your own layers. You can drift. You can soften. You can rest in the middle of the story. Somewhere between the desert and the river, between the cliffs of the West Bank and the soft green of the fields, there must have been a workshop. Not a grand palace hall, not a temple full of incense and chanting, but a working room, warm, practical, and quietly alive. A place where heat was tamed and patience was trained. A place where hands learned the slow language of metal. Tonight we enter that workshop as gently as we entered the tomb corridor, without hurry, without noise, with a lantern turned low. Imagine the door as a simple curtain of linen. When you lift it, the air inside is warmer than the night outside, and it carries a faint scent of charcoal, resin, and polished wood. Somewhere a small fire breathes, glowing, not roaring, its light moving softly across the walls like a calm animal shifting in sleep. If you listen closely, you can hear the rhythm of work. Tap, tap, tap. Not the sharp hammering of modern construction, but a measured tapping, the sound of care, repeated. Between the taps there are pauses long enough to breathe, long enough to look, long enough to feel the surface with fingertips and decide what comes next. This is the kind of rhythm your nervous system understands. It is steady, it is predictable, it does not demand. So if you want, let your breath match it for a moment. In, tap, out, tap, in, tap, out, tap. In that quiet synchronization, the mind often loosens its grip on the day. Thoughts that were clenched begin to open, the way hands open when they realize they are safe. On a low table, tools rest like sleeping birds. Small hammers, smooth stones, bronze chisels, wooden forms. There are bowls that hold powdered minerals, strips of linen, and little pieces of metal waiting to be transformed. The floor is dusted with fine grit, and in the corner a pot of water catches a faint reflection of the fire, dark water holding light the way the Nile holds the moon. Sometimes, when the work pauses, one artisan rinses their hands in the water pot. The water darkens, then clears again, and the ripples make the firelight shimmer on the ceiling. They shake their fingers once, quietly, and you can hear the droplets land on the floor like tiny punctuation marks. Another artisan rolls a bead between thumb and forefinger, checking its smoothness, then sets it down with a care that feels affectionate. In these small motions, the whole room becomes a lullaby. If you have been gripping the day too tightly, let that rinsing remind you to release, gently. An artisan stands near the heat, face calm, eyes trained not on drama but on detail. Another sits nearby, shaping something smaller, perhaps an amulet, perhaps a clasp, perhaps a bead. They do not speak much, not because they are unfriendly, but because concentration has its own kind of quiet. The gold is not a solid block. It arrives as sheets, as fragments, as pieces that can be melted, poured, and hammered thin. And here is one of the gentle truths of gold. It loves to move, it yields, it listens, it takes shape under patient pressure. But pure gold is also soft in a way that can become vulnerable. Over time, it can bend too easily, it can dent, it can lose the firmness that a mask, meant to last beyond a human lifetime, would need. So the artisans blend it, a little copper perhaps to give strength, a little silver perhaps to soften the color. Not much, just enough. A quiet cooperation of elements. If you have ever needed support, ever felt that you were too soft for a hard week, this may comfort you. Even gold becomes more lasting when it is allowed to be helped. The mixture is heated until it glows with a deep, sleepy red. Not bright like an alarm, but red like embers in a fireplace when the house is quiet. Then it is brought out and set on a surface, stone maybe, or a block of wood hardened by years of use. Tap, tap, tap. The sheet spreads, thins, becomes smoother. The artisan turns it, heats it again, then returns to the tapping. Heat, then pressure. Warmth, then shaping. a gentle cycle, like breath itself. In, out, in, out. And slowly something begins to appear, a curve, a cheek, the soft rise of a brow, a surface that will someday hold calm eyes and closed lips. The face we know from the museum begins, here, as an intention. Not an object, an intention. To protect a name, to hold a likeness, to give the dead a steady presence for the long journey. Imagine the artisan pausing, letting the sheet cool slightly, then lifting it with careful hands. The metal is warm, not burning. It feels alive, as if it still remembers the fire. They bring it to a wooden form shaped like a head, perhaps a sculpted core, perhaps a template made from measurements. They press the gold gently, coaxing it to conform, encouraging it rather than forcing it. They smooth it with a tool that does not scratch, only persuades. There is a kindness in this work, a belief that materials respond better when met with patience. In the corner, someone prepares a different piece, the striped Nemes headdress, that familiar pattern of lines. The stripes will not be painted like modern paint. They will be created through inlays, through colored glass or stones, through precise channels that hold color the way a riverbank holds water. Blue like deep water, gold like sunlight. The colors of the world the Egyptians knew best. And then there are the details that make the mask feel not like a symbol, but like a person. The small curve at the corner of the mouth, not quite a smile, more like serenity. The smooth planes of the cheeks reflecting light softly. The eyes outlined with careful darkness, perhaps glass, perhaps stone, perhaps a mixture of materials that catch light without glare. And the ears. Those pierced ears again. In this workshop, someone decides to make holes. A small action, almost delicate. A tiny puncture that says, this face belonged to someone who was once young, once dressed, once adorned, once prepared for life as well as for death. Or perhaps it says something else, that objects can travel from one story to another, that a mask can be adapted, that a name can be adjusted, that the world of humans is full of practical decisions made under the wide gaze of eternity. Tonight we do not need certainty, we only need the softness of the question. Now let the lantern of our imagination move to the beard. In images, the beard looks like a single piece, but in making, it is a separate element that must be fitted. It must sit properly, it must align, it must be supported in a way that will survive time. So inside there are joins, small internal structures that you would never see unless you looked with modern eyes. A tube perhaps, a pin perhaps, a hidden support that allows the beard to connect without stress. It is the kind of engineering that does not brag, it simply works. And again, this can feel like a quiet lesson. The things that hold us together are often invisible. A routine, a friend who checks in, a cup of tea at the same hour each night, a slow breath when the mind starts to race. We do not see these supports, but they keep the whole shape steady. As the mask nears completion, the workshop quiet deepens, the tapping becomes rarer. More time is spent on smoothing, polishing, checking. The surface is rubbed until it catches light like still water, not flashy but deep, like a pond that holds the sky. When the mask is finally lifted and held at arm's length, you can imagine the artisan seeing not only their work, but their world reflected in it. Firelight, hands, dust, patience, and the quiet pride of craft done well. And then, outside the workshop, the night moves on. The Nile flows, the desert cools. The stars keep their slow turning. The mask will travel from workshop to ceremony, from ceremony to tomb, from tomb to sand, from sand to museum. It will pass through centuries without knowing it. It will be cared for by hands that speak different languages, under lights that are not flames but electricity. Yet the core remains the same, a face made to hold a presence. And this is where we bring the story back to you softly, because you too have been shaped by cycles. Heat and pressure, effort and rest. Days that asked a lot of you, and nights that tried to give you back to yourself. If you have been feeling worn lately, consider the gold. It does not become beautiful by avoiding heat. It becomes beautiful by meeting heat, then being allowed to cool, by being shaped, then being allowed to breathe. So tonight, let yourself cool. Let the day's heat leave your shoulders. Let the tapping of thoughts slow down until there is more space between them. Tap, pause, tap, pause. In that pause, the mind often finds the doorway to sleep. And still one gentle question remains, like a lantern left on a low table. If the Egyptians believed the wren could be fed by remembrance, then whose name, tonight, is asking to be spoken kindly in your own heart? Not as duty, not as guilt, only as warmth. In the next part, we will return to the valley again, to a cool chamber where names were written, and we will listen to the way time can both erase and preserve, like sand that covers, like light that reveals. For now, let the workshop fire dim in your imagination. Let the gold face rest. Let your breathing become the only rhythm you need. In, out, in, out. And if your eyes are ready to close, you can let them close the way a curtain falls at the end of a quiet play, slowly, softly, with gratitude. Night returns to the valley of the kings the way a blanket returns to a bed, without ceremony, without hurry, simply settling where it belongs. The limestone hills fade from gold to ash blue, then to a deeper color that feels almost like velvet. The air cools, and the desert, which can look sharp in sunlight, becomes softer in shadow, as if every edge has learned to forgive. If you are listening tonight with your room dim and your body heavy, let your imagination travel here lightly, like a quiet bird gliding with no need to flap. You do not have to picture everything perfectly. A few gentle images are enough. A sloping ridge, a ribbon of stars, the faint scent of warm dust turning cool. Somewhere along one of the valley's winding paths, there is an entrance set into the rock. Not grand, not flashy, just a cut in the hillside, a mouth of darkness held open by steps. When you approach it slowly, you notice how the temperature shifts again, the way it did before, like stepping from sunlight into a shaded doorway. The coolness is immediate, clean, and comforting. And it is here, in this simple threshold, that time shows one of its kindest talents, because time does not only erase, time also covers. Sometimes, when you are anxious, your mind believes it must stay uncovered, alert, exposed, ready for whatever might happen next. But the desert teaches another way. It shows how covering can be protection, not danger. Think of the way you pull a sheet up to your chest on a cool night, and how your body understands immediately that it is allowed to soften. Think of a book closed to keep its pages safe, of a violin resting in its case, of a lamp shaded so its light becomes gentle. In the valley, rubble and dust did something similar. They lowered the world's volume. They kept sun and wind from worrying the sealed door. They made a small pocket of stillness where objects could remain unstartled by centuries. If you want, borrow that lesson now. Imagine laying a light cover over today's thoughts, nothing heavy, just enough to quiet their edges, so your breathing can move freely, easily, again. Long ago, after the burial chambers were sealed, the valley went on living its quiet life, Wind moving sand, workers building and rebuilding, stones breaking, fragments falling, bits of ordinary debris gathered near entrances, chips of limestone, broken pottery, dust and rubble that meant nothing to anyone at the time. Layer by layer, those leftovers drifted into place and the doorway disappeared. Not with a dramatic slam, but with a slow tucking in. Imagine that gesture, the valley pulling a blanket over what needed to sleep. When the modern world arrived with lanterns and notebooks and careful questions, it was not meeting a villain hiding a secret. It was meeting a landscape that had been keeping something safe in the simplest way possible by letting it rest, undisturbed. If you have ever placed a cover over something delicate, an instrument, a piece of furniture, a sleeping child, you already understand the tenderness of this kind of protection. It is not glamorous, it is practical love. Now let the scene become quieter still. It is evening in 1922, the sky is fading to a muted violet, and the first stars are appearing, shyly, as if they don't want to interrupt. Lanterns sit low on the ground, their light soft and honey-colored. The men working nearby speak in low tones, not because they are frightened, but because the air itself encourages restraint. Even laughter, if it comes, is brief and gentle, like a cough cleared in a library. Howard Carter stands near the sealed doorway. Tonight, we are not interested in the noise that history often brings around a famous moment. We are interested in the small sensations, the grit on fingertips, the faint creak of leather straps, the tiny flutter of a moth drawn to lamplight. A small opening is made, not large enough for a body, just enough for a candle to pass. The candle flame trembles, then steadies, and through that narrow gap, warm light spills into a space that has not seen light for a very long time. The air inside does not rush out, it does not hiss. It simply holds still, as if it has been waiting patiently for someone to arrive with respect. The first glimpse is not a shock, it is a hush. Shapes in the darkness. A glint of something smooth, the curve of wood, the suggestion of linen. The kind of stillness you feel when you enter a room where someone has been sleeping. If you like, take a slow breath here and let your shoulders drop another small amount, in and out. There is nothing you need to brace for. The tomb is not here to frighten you. It is here to remind you that human beings have always wanted peace. As the doorway widens and the lantern light grows, the objects inside begin to show themselves more clearly, like islands rising from mist. There are chairs, chests, carved animal heads, a tangle of ordinary beauty arranged with care. It feels less like treasure and more like a room packed for a long journey, someone making sure that the next road will not be lonely. And on the walls farther in, there are painted figures and words, the same kind of patient language we met in the corridor before. Spells, yes, but not the kind of spells that threaten. More like instructions written with tenderness, how to find your way, how to be protected, how to remember who you are. This is where the idea of Wren return, quietly like a familiar melody. A name is not merely a label here, a name is a doorway. The Egyptians wrote names so they could be spoken, they carved names so they could be touched by light, they framed names so they could be protected. In their imagination, the name needed nourishment the way a lamp needs oil. Spoken gently, it stayed alive. And perhaps that is why, even in our time, names can still comfort us. If your mind has been restless today, try this small practice, very softly. Say your own name inside your thoughts once, as if you are speaking to someone you care about. Not loudly, not as a command, just as a reassurance. You are here. You belong to this moment. Then let the name fade like a candle dimming when the room is already safe. Back in the valley, the night deepens. The lantern light inside the tomb stays warm and steady. and outside the stars continue their slow rotation, indifferent to fame, generous with quiet. In the years that followed the opening, many stories gathered around the tomb like wind-blown sand. Some were careful, some were exaggerated. Some tried to make the discovery feel like a curse, as if the past were angry at being seen. But the soft truth is simpler. When people don't understand something, they often wrap it in a story that matches their nervous system. A fearful mind wants a fearful explanation. A dramatic era wants drama. Yet what the tomb mostly offers is the opposite: evidence of care. Dry air that kept wood from rotting too quickly. Cool darkness that slowed decay. A sealed environment that held objects the way a closed book holds its pages. No magic needed, only conditions and time cooperating quietly. And still it is human to enjoy a little mist of myth. So let us treat the legend of a curse the way we treat fog on the Nile. Not something to fear, simply something that drifts, making the lamps look softer. A story people told to give shape to awe. A whisper that says, "This matters, so be careful." We can accept that whisper without letting it tighten our muscles. We can hear it, then let it pass, in and out. Now imagine moving deeper into the tomb, not with urgency, but with the slow pace of someone exploring a quiet museum at closing time. Each step is deliberate. Each object is greeted like an old acquaintance. You do not touch, you simply notice. The air is cooler here, the smell is faintly sweet with resin, the way old wood sometimes smells when it has been sealed away. Dust rests on surfaces like soft flour, untouched. The lantern beam moves across it, and for a moment the dust sparkles, not like glitter, but like tiny grains that have decided to reflect just enough light to be kind. In a side space, you imagine a small arrangement of personal objects, perhaps a mirror, perhaps beads, perhaps a charm. The ordinary things that traveled with a young king, or with someone near him, into the unknown. And then, in the quiet, your lantern finds writing again. A cartouche, an oval loop like a protective ring. Inside it, the signs of a name. We do not need to read it perfectly tonight. We only need to feel what it represents. Identity held gently in stone, like a fragile seed inside a shell. This is our calm cliffhanger, because sometimes when modern eyes look closely through scans, through careful examination, through the patient study of tool marks, they notice that a name may not be as simple as it appears, that beneath one set of signs there may be traces of another, that the past, like a well-used manuscript, sometimes carries revisions. In the next part of our journey, we will lean closer to those quiet revisions. We will explore how a name can be smoothed, recarved, respoken, and how, even then, the human longing to be remembered remains the same. For now, let the tomb corridor fade to a comfortable darkness in your mind. Let the lantern dim. Let the valley cover everything again, softly, as if tucking the world in, and if your eyes are ready to close, you can let them close with the same gentleness. The night is still here. The sand is patient. And you tonight are safe enough to rest. If you have ever walked through a museum alone, you may remember how different it feels when you're not trying to keep up with anyone. Your steps slow down. Your eyes stop scanning for the main attraction. You begin to notice what is quiet, what is tucked in corners, what waits without demanding. Tonight, let our story become that kind of museum walk. Imagine the building once more, but not in the daytime, not under bright crowds and camera flashes. Imagine it in the gentle hours, late evening or early morning, when the air inside is steady and cool, and the lights are set low enough that the objects seem to glow from within rather than glare. In this hush, you can take the past one small piece at a time. The first case we approach holds something that looks almost ordinary at first. A mirror. Not glass, not silver. Not the sharp modern kind that tells the truth like a loudspeaker. This mirror is copper, warmed by its own color, softened by time. Its handle is shaped like a lotus, the flower that closes at night and opens again at dawn, as if it understands the rhythm of rest. When you angle your imagined lantern light across the surface, you do not see a perfect reflection. You see a gentle suggestion, a softened version of whatever stands before it. There is something kind about that, because so much of what keeps us awake at night is the feeling that we must face ourselves with harsh clarity. The mistakes, the unfinished plans, the words we wish we had said differently. But the copper mirror offers a different way. It says, you can look softly. You can meet yourself the way the desert meets the valley at dusk, without judgment, without rush. If your thoughts are loud tonight, imagine holding that mirror for a moment. Feel its weight, solid but not heavy. Feel the handle's smoothness where a thumb might rest. Let the mirror become a symbol of gentle self-seeing. Now the second case, a necklace, 30 amethyst beads, deep purple like twilight, 2 beads of agate, warm as sun-baked stone, and a small hippopotamus amulet that looks almost playful, rounded, sturdy, unafraid. You can picture the necklace laid on dark fabric inside the case, the beads resting in a curve like a sleeping animal. One bead, then the next, then the next. It is easy to be soothed by repetition. Your mind likes it. Your nervous system trusts it. If you want, let the beads guide your breathing again. In, out, in, out. If you have been carrying worry, you do not have to carry it through every breath. You can set it down between beads, between seconds, between small moments of quiet. Now, a third case holds something even smaller, a handful of game pieces. A board game once played in lamplight perhaps, while the Nile moved nearby and the desert cooled outside the doorway. Tiny pieces shaped by hands that knew the comfort of making something fit neatly into a palm. When you look at these pieces, it becomes impossible to think of ancient Egypt as only monuments and pyramids. You begin to feel the ordinary evenings, someone laughing softly, someone leaning back against a wall, tired but content, someone saying, "Your turn," in a language that has vanished, but in a tone you still recognize. This is one of the gentlest discoveries history offers. People have always needed small ways to rest together. A game, a story, a shared cup. The modern world, with its screens and schedules, has not invented the need for comfort. It has only changed the furniture. And then, in another case, there are amulets. An eye of Horus for wholeness, a heart scarab, heavy with meaning, an ankh, the quiet symbol of life, a jed pillar for stability, upright, steady, reliable. These pieces are small enough to be carried against the skin. They were meant to be close, like a hand held in the dark. Notice what that implies. The people who made and wore these amulets believed that protection could be gentle, not a weapon, not a threat, a symbol, a reminder, a steadying touch. If you have ever worn a ring that made you feel more anchored, or kept a photograph in your wallet, or carried a stone in your pocket because it felt good to touch, and then you already understand the logic of amulets. They do not change the world outside, they change the world inside. They give the mind something quiet to hold. Now, if we continue along the gallery, the famous mask waits at the far end like a calm moon, but we do not need to hurry toward it. We can approach slowly because our story is not powered by urgency, it is powered by steadiness. As you near the mask, you might feel how the room itself seems to lower its voice. The lighting is careful, the glass is thick, the air is controlled. People who pass by tend to slow down without knowing why. Gold has that effect when it is framed by silence, not excitement. silence. The mask's surface catches light like still water. The cheeks are smooth, the eyes are calm. The mouth is closed as if keeping a gentle secret for those who are quiet enough to listen. And there are those pierced ears, small holes that insist on humanity. Tonight, let them do what they do best. Open a soft question. A question you do not have to answer, just a question you can rest beside. Who was this made for? Who first imagined this face? What hands touched it, polished it, carried it, wrapped it, placed it down with care? In the end, perhaps the most important answer is not a name. The most important answer may be the feeling the object carries across time. A feeling of being prepared for, a feeling of being protected, a feeling of being remembered. And this is where Ren returns again like a warm thread. The Egyptians believed a name could be fed by being spoken, that as long as a name lived in the world, something of the person lived too. If you have been feeling invisible lately, if your days have been full of doing and providing and managing, but not full of being seen, then this idea can land like a soft hand on your shoulder. You are not meant to disappear inside your tasks. You are allowed to be a person again, just as the ancient dead were allowed to be remembered. If you like, say your own name inside your thoughts one more time, gently. Not like a command, like a kindness, then let it fade. Now here is a small question for you, asked the way rain asks the roof. Quietly, repeatedly, without pressure. If tonight's story could keep one small part of you safe, what would you want it to be? A memory? A hope? A tired part of your heart? You do not need to answer out loud, just let the question drift through you like cool air in a stone corridor. As we begin to leave the gallery, notice how your body may feel heavier, calmer. The mind often relaxes when it stops trying to carry everything at once. The past has offered you small lanterns tonight. A copper mirror that reflects softly, a necklace of repeating beads, a game piece that fits in the palm, an amulet that promises steadiness, a name that can be spoken with kindness. These are not loud miracles. They are quiet, reliable ones. And in that reliability, sleep often arrives. In the next part, we will begin to let the lights dim even further. We will return to the cool corridor of stone, then slowly step back into the open desert night, where sand falls like soft punctuation and thoughts can loosen one by one. For now, you can linger in the gallery a moment longer. The quiet at this hour can feel almost like a private room inside your mind. If your thoughts drift toward your own life, your inbox, your schedule, the list that waits for morning, let them drift the way a leaf drifts on slow water. You do not need to chase them, you can watch them pass. In ancient Egypt, there was a ritual sometimes described as opening the mouth, a careful gesture meant to restore breath and speech beyond death. We don't need ceremony tonight. We can keep only the gentle idea that a tired self can be opened again by kindness, a sip of water, a longer exhale, a blanket pulled higher, a lamp turned low. Even now you are doing that restoration. You are letting story replace noise. You are letting rhythm replace hurry. If it feels right, make one tiny adjustment. Let your teeth separate. Let your tongue rest heavy and calm. Let the muscles around your eyes soften as if you are smiling, but only on the inside. In another case, you might notice a strip of linen, its weave visible under soft light. The fibers cross and cross again, steady as a promise. Linen was not only luxury, it was care. It wrapped bodies, protected objects, held oils and resins close, and turned practical work into something almost tender. Think of your own linens tonight, the pillowcase under your cheek, the sheet over your legs. Ordinary cloth can be a sanctuary. It can be a quiet boundary between you and the world. And if you are listening in a city where distant traffic still murmurs, imagine it as far-off drums from another century. If you are listening in a quiet suburb where the heater clicks on and off, imagine it as the museum's slow breathing. Either way, you belong in this calm. Let peace be made of ordinary materials, breath, fabric, quiet light. Nothing more. Just this steady moment sliding gently forward until your mind forgets to hold itself tight at all. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. And if it brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself. Here, no one rests alone. There is a special kind of patience in the work of reading the past, not the patience of waiting in a line or enduring a slow commute, but the patience of looking at a surface long enough for it to start speaking. Stone does not explain itself quickly. Gold does not reveal its story on demand. You have to meet them the way you meet the night, slowly, without forcing, letting your attention soften until the smallest details feel safe to appear. Imagine, for a moment, a museum after closing. The lights are lower now, no longer trying to impress anyone. The air feels steady, like a calm breath held at a comfortable pace. The halls are empty, and the only sounds are gentle ones. A quiet hum from climate systems, the soft click of a security guard's shoes far away, a faint settling creak as the building relaxes into the dark. In this late-hour quiet, the objects become more honest. Gold is not loud, it is deep. Stone is not cold, it is restful. And somewhere behind a staff-only door, a conservator leans close to an inscription with a small lamp and a patient gaze. They angle the light so it skims the surface at a low slant. This kind of light is not for glamour, it is for truth. Under slanted light, even a smooth surface reveals its memory. Tiny ridges, soft hollows, hair-thin lines where a tool once passed, areas where the stone was smoothed, then reworked, like a shoreline quietly reshaped by water. This is where our story turns very gently toward a soft discovery. The past sometimes edits itself, not with loud erasures but with quiet revisions. In ancient Egypt, names were precious. We have been carrying that idea with us like a small lantern. Ren, the name that lives when it is spoken kindly. A name framed in a cartouche like a loop of rope drawn around it for protection. But human history is made by humans, and humans sometimes change their minds. A new ruler arrives, a new belief rises, a court shifts, a family line becomes complicated, and somewhere in a workshop or a temple corridor, a careful hand takes a chisel and begins to adjust what was written before, not to destroy everything, just to alter enough. Under the right light, you can see it, the older signs faintly ghosting beneath the newer ones, a curve that does not quite match, a depth that is slightly different, a surface that seems smoother in one patch, as if someone once rubbed it down patiently before carving again. It is not a jump scare, it is not a scandal, it is simply the truth that memory, even carved into stone, can be managed, attempted at least, by those who hold power. And yet the desert and time are stubborn in a quiet way. They keep traces, they leave whispers, they make it possible centuries later for a careful eye to say, something was here before. If you return in your mind to the golden mask resting under museum light like a calm moon, you can imagine this same kind of whisper. Not necessarily visible to the casual visitor, but present for those who look closely. Joins, seams, subtle differences in the way surfaces meet. Some researchers have wondered, very softly, without needing certainty, whether parts of the burial equipment associated with Tutankhamun were adapted from earlier plans. The end of one life and the beginning of another can happen faster than preparation. Even royalty, even ritual sometimes must improvise with reverence. A beautiful object can be repurposed, adjusted, guided into a new role the way a family might pass down a cherished coat and alter it to fit. And again, there is something tender in that, because in your own life, you have been repurposed too. You have changed roles. You have worn different titles, different responsibilities. You have been a younger self, then an older one. You have been the person who needed help, then the person who gave it. You have been the one who rushed and the one who learned slowly to breathe again. These are not betrayals of identity. They are revisions made by living. Now let's hold the image of revision gently, like a warm stone in the palm. Picture an ancient scribe at a low table. The room is quiet, lit by an oil lamp that makes everything softer at the edges. A brush rests in a shallow dish. A roll of papyrus waits, pale and patient. The scribe dips the brush, then pauses, not from hesitation, but from respect. Writing a name is not casual. Writing a name is a kind of care. The brush touches down, a stroke, a pause, another stroke. Each sign arrives like a small picture. Each sign is placed as if it matters, because it does. The name is being fed, the name is being protected, and somewhere else, perhaps long after, another hand returns to that name with a different intention. They paint over it, or scrape it, or change a sign. Maybe they believe they are controlling the future by controlling memory, but even paint has layers. Even scraped papyrus holds fiber scars. Even smoothed stone remembers the pressure of the older lines beneath. This is the quiet miracle of careful looking. The past cannot be fully erased without leaving evidence of the erasure. If you let your eyes rest softly right now, whether they are open or closed, notice how comforting that can be, because it suggests that what is true has a way of lingering. Not in a dramatic way, in a gentle way. Like warmth in a room after the fire has been turned low. In ancient Egypt, erasing a name was one of the harshest gestures imaginable because it threatened continuity. Yet paradoxically, those gestures become part of the story too. The very act of trying to remove someone leaves marks that later generations can read. It becomes, in its own unintended way, another form of remembering. The mask's pierced ears return here like a small, quiet clue, a detail that refuses to be purely symbolic, a detail that says a real person with a real body lived beneath this idea of kingship. Youth, fashion, ceremony, identity, these things were present, not abstract. And if the object passed through different hands, different plans, different names, then it also passed through the human truth that life is not always tidy. Tonight we do not need to untangle every thread. We simply notice the texture of the tapestry, and we let that noticing slow us down. If your mind tends to race, if it tries to solve everything, this is a good moment to practice a softer kind of attention. You do not need to solve. You only need to see in and out. Imagine a cartouche again, an oval loop, like rope, like protection. Inside it, instead of a royal name, place one gentle word. Here. Just here. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not the pile of tasks or the unfinished conversations. Just the quiet fact of being here, breathing, safe enough to rest. Now think of the tomb corridor we walked earlier. Cool air, stone walls, lantern lights sliding over painted figures. Somewhere on those walls, names are written as guidance, not as threat. Names are offered the way you offer a handrail to someone walking down steps in the dark. And that is what names can be in our own lives too. A handrail. The name of a friend you trust. The name of a place that calms you. The name of a memory that makes your shoulders soften. If you like, choose one of those names now, just one, and let it sit beside your breathing like a small lamp. You do not have to hold it tightly. Let it glow, then fade naturally. Because the point tonight is not to cling. It is to drift. Back in the museum's late-hour quiet, The conservator turns off the angled lamp. The surface returns to its ordinary smoothness. The ghosts of older lines are no longer visible, but they have not vanished. They are simply resting again like words under a blanket. The glass cases continue their steady, protective work, holding temperature, holding humidity, holding time at a gentler pace. And the objects, mask, beads, mirrors, small amulets, keep doing what they have always done in every era. They offer steadiness. They offer continuity. They offer a reminder that beauty can survive, especially when it is met with care. This is our calm cliffhanger for the next step of the journey. If time can cover a doorway and keep it safe, and if memory can carry a name even when the surface changes, then what does it mean to wake the past without disturbing it? In the next part, we will return to the objects again, as if walking through a quiet gallery. We will let each small thing become a gentle guide, and we will bring the story toward its deeper softness, that the most lasting kind of immortality may simply be being remembered with kindness once, quietly, by someone who needed calm. For now, let the museum dim further in your mind. Let the lights soften. Let the angled shadows fade. And feel your own breathing become the simplest, truest rhythm in the room. When you leave a museum late in the evening, the world outside can feel quieter than it really is. Streetlights still glow, cars still pass. The city still has its small, ordinary noises. Yet your mind carries a softness from the dim halls and the steady hush, and that softness changes what you hear. The familiar sounds become farther away. Even your own footsteps seem gentler, as if you are learning to walk like someone who does not need to hurry. Tonight, we take that softness with us. We step out of the imagined gallery and return, slowly, to the Valley of the Kings. Not to reenact discovery, not to chase answers, but to let the landscape do what it has always done, settle the mind into a wider rhythm. Picture the desert again, under night. The sand is pale in starlight, not bright, just present. The cliffs are dark silhouettes, their edges softened by distance. The air is dry and mild, and it carries that clean, mineral scent that makes your thoughts feel less sticky. If there is wind, it is a polite wind, brushing the surface of the dunes like a hand smoothing a blanket. In the valley, darkness is not an enemy. It is a companion. It makes everything simpler. It reduces choices. It invites your body to stop performing and start resting. If you are listening in bed, let your own room become part of this simplicity. The ceiling above you is your sky. The blanket is your desert wind made warm. The small sounds around you are your night creatures settling into their places. In and out. Now imagine a single lantern. Not a harsh flashlight, not a beam that cuts and startles, but a lantern with a low flame. The light is amber and kind. It pools on the ground in a circle, then fades at the edges. Beyond it, the valley remains dark, and that darkness feels safe because it is not asking you to see everything at once. The lantern moves slowly as if it respects the night. It passes over stone steps leading down into a tomb entrance. The steps are worn, slightly uneven, shaped by hands that believed in patience. Each step is an invitation to slow further, to let your breath lengthen without effort. At the doorway, the air cools again. Cool stone air, gentle on the skin. Your shoulders may drop just from imagining it. Inside, the corridor is quiet in a way that feels almost liquid, like deep water. The walls hold inscriptions and painted figures, but you do not need to read them. Tonight they are simply textures, steady patterns that the mind can rest on without needing to solve. This is one of the hidden gifts of ancient art: repetition. A row of signs, a sequence of forms, a rhythm of colors, The nervous system loves rhythm because rhythm promises there will be no sudden change. If you have been carrying a scattered day, let the corridor's repetition gather you. In, out, a slow breath, a slower breath. The lantern light slides across a cartouche, that oval loop that holds a name. The loop is simple, like a piece of rope drawn into a shape. It looks like a promise. What is inside will be protected. And then, as if the story is turning itself down another notch, you realize something. The most comforting part of this whole journey is not gold, it is not fame, it is not even certainty. The most comforting part is care. Care is what made the objects, care is what arranged them, care is what covered the doorway with rubble and dust, care is what lifted them again with gloved hands, care is what placed them in glass, in steady air, under low light. Care is what brings us here tonight with no need to hurry, no need to be impressed, only a wish to be soothed. In ancient Egypt, care took the form of preparation. Small amulets placed close to the body, words painted on linen, names carved and framed, a mirror to carry light, a necklace to carry protection, a game to carry familiarity. And beneath all of those actions was a quiet human hope that the road ahead would not be lonely. If you have ever packed for a trip and tucked in something small, simply because it comforted you, you already understand that hope. A favorite sweater, a photograph, a book whose pages feel like a friend's voice. The Egyptians packed the same way, only their journey was imagined to be longer. As you stand in this corridor with your lantern, you may notice another truth that does not need to be dramatic to be real. Time is both a hand that erases and a hand that holds. It erases footprints, yes, but it also holds doors closed so the inside can remain still. It erases colors, yes, but it also holds shapes long enough for us to see them. It erases names sometimes, but it also holds the trace of a name beneath the surface, like a memory under a blanket. And because time works this way, you can trust it a little more in your own life. You do not need to carry everything forever. Some worries will fade because they are meant to fade. Some sharp edges will soften because that is what time does naturally, like wind working on stone. Your job tonight is not to force the softening. Your job is simply to rest inside it, in and out. Now let us walk back up the steps, slowly. One step, then another. The lantern light lifts with you and the corridor coolness gives way to the night air outside. When you step out into the valley, the sky is wide and calm, scattered with stars that do not blink quickly. They are patient lights. In the desert, sand is always falling, even when you cannot see it. A grain loosens, slides, settles. Another follows. A small slope changes shape by the tiniest amount. No alarm, no urgency, only gentle adjustment. This is how you can set your thoughts down, not in a dramatic clearing of the mind, but grain by grain. Imagine each thought as a single grain of sand, a thought about an email, a thought about a conversation, a thought about tomorrow's list. Each one can slide off the ridge of your attention and settle into a quiet dune below. You do not need to push them. You can simply allow gravity to do its calm work. In, out. If a thought returns, that is fine. It can return like a grain that rolls back up a little, then settles again. No frustration needed. The desert does not get angry at sand. It just lets it move until it finds rest. Now listen for the softest sounds, a distant breeze, a faint rustle of cloth, the quiet shift of your own body settling deeper into the mattress. These sounds are not interruptions. They are proof that the world is functioning without you having to manage it. The night runs itself. The stars turn without your help. Your heart beats without your instructions. Your lungs breathe with only the gentlest invitation. This is enough. you are enough. If you want a small practice to carry into sleep, let it be this. On each inhale, imagine the lantern brightening slightly. On each exhale, imagine the lantern dimming slightly. A little brighter, a little dimmer, over and over, not to measure, not to control, but to give your mind one soft pattern to follow until it forgets to worry. Inhale, the lantern glows. Exhale, the lantern softens. Inhale, warm. Exhale, quiet. Now think again of Ren, the name that breathes. You do not need to carve your name into stone to be real. You do not need to be famous to be remembered. Sometimes your truest immortality is simple, being held with kindness in one person's mind, even for a moment. Perhaps someone somewhere has said your name with relief because you arrived. Perhaps someone has said it with gratitude because you helped. Perhaps someone has said it with tenderness because you listened. Even if you cannot recall the exact moment, you can trust that the way you have moved through the world has left small lanterns behind you. A calm word, a steady presence, a quiet kindness, those are the things that last. Before sleep takes you fully, imagine one more gentle scene. A curator, late at night, makes a final round through the exhibit hall. They pause at the glass case, not with pride, but with quiet responsibility. They check the humidity gauge, the temperature readout, the soft seal of the door. Then, with a small nod, they turn off a light and the mask returns to shadow. The beads return to darkness. The copper mirror returns to its warm, private dimness. Nothing is lost. Everything is simply resting. You can do the same with your own day. Close the case of it softly. Let it remain safe but out of view. Tomorrow can meet it again. Tonight, you are allowed to be unfinished. Let the night watch over you quietly, now. And tonight, you do not have to earn them again. You can simply rest. Let the valley fade now, gently, like a scene dissolving into darkness. Let the sand become a soft texture behind your closed eyes. Let the lantern become smaller, warmer, dimmer, until it is only a glow you can feel rather than see. If tonight's story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself when you're ready. And if your mind is already drifting, you can let that be your comment to the night. A longer exhale, a quieter heart, a body sinking into safety. In the next part, we will begin to gather the story into an even softer ending, returning the objects to their quiet places and letting the night close its doors with tenderness. For now, you can drift, you can release, grain by grain, breath by breath, lantern by lantern. There is a moment, late at night, when the world feels as if it is packing itself away. The last email has stopped arriving, the last street noise has thinned. Even the air seems to move more slowly, like it is trying not to disturb anyone. In that moment, it becomes easier to believe that rest is not something you have to fight for. It is something you can simply allow. Tonight, we will allow. And as we do, we will begin to set our story back into its quiet places, like returning delicate objects to their shelves. Imagine the museum one last time, not the museum as a public place, but the museum as a guardian of stillness. The doors are closed now, the lights in the main halls are dimmed. Only the softest illumination remains, enough for safety, not for spectacle. The air is balanced, gently controlled, like a calm breath held steady. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the building's quiet systems working, a low hum, a faint click, the steady pulse of preservation. It is not unlike the sound of your own room at night, heating and cooling cycles, the gentle whisper of electricity, the quiet proof that the world keeps functioning without needing your attention. In this quiet, A curator makes a final round. They move slowly not because they are tired, but because they respect what they are guarding. Their footsteps are soft on the floor, and the keys at their belt make a tiny, muted sound like wind chimes heard from far away. They pause at a glass case. Inside, the copper mirror rests on dark fabric, its surface catching a faint pool of light. The lotus handle curves gently, and the copper seems to hold warmth, even in shadow. The curator does not touch it. They only look, briefly, kindly, then move on. It feels like a blessing. A silent acknowledgement that this object has done its work for the day. It has been seen, it has been remembered, it can sleep again. Next, the necklace. The amethyst beads lie in their curve, deep purple softened by dim light. 2 agate beads glow faintly like small pieces of sunset trapped in stone. The hippopotamus amulet sits at the end like a quiet joke told by someone who loved life even while preparing for eternity. In a way, the necklace looks like a breath, a curve, a pause, a gentle continuity. The curator checks the seal, the humidity, the steady temperature. Then the case returns to its simple, faithful quiet. And you may notice that your own body is doing something similar. Your shoulders are lowering, your jaw is loosening, your hands are becoming heavier. Your breathing is settling into the slow, even pattern it naturally prefers when nothing is chasing it. In, out. Now, the game pieces. Small, patient shapes arranged in a way that suggests order and play. In the dimness, they seem even more intimate, as if they belong not to an ancient king but to an ordinary evening. Someone sitting near a lamp, smiling softly, touching each piece the way you touch a worry when you are ready to set it down. The curator looks, then moves on. The amulets are next, tiny guardians of stability and wholeness. They sit in a case that feels almost like a jewelry box. Their shapes are simple but full of meaning, an eye, a pillar, a cross of life. They are reminders that protection does not need to be loud. It can be carried quietly, close to the heart. And then, at the far end, the mask. Even in dim light, it does not disappear. It simply changes. Gold does not vanish. It deepens. It becomes more like the moon, a calm presence in the dark, steady and unmoving. The curator stands there a moment longer than at the other cases, not because the mask is more important, but because it holds so much attention in the human imagination. It is a magnet for the mind. People come to it with excitement, with awe, with questions. But tonight, there is no crowd, no cameras, no bright chatter, only quiet, only the low hum of the building, only the soft, respectful pause of one person standing before an object that has traveled through millennia. If you imagine the mask now, notice its calmness. The eyes are steady, the mouth is closed, the cheeks are smooth, and those pierced ears remain small, human, intimate. The curator's gaze is not possessive. It is caretaking. Then gently, they dim the light further, not turning it off harshly, but lowering it until the mask becomes less a spectacle and more a resting face in shadow. And this is where the story begins to return you to yourself, because you too have a face, a real face. Not a public face meant for work and tasks and composure, but the private face you have at night when no one is watching. The face that deserves softness. If you can, allow your own facial muscles to relax again. Let the corners of your mouth loosen. Let your forehead smooth. Let your eyelids become heavier, as if they are listening to gravity with trust. In and out. Now we leave the museum. We step back out into the desert night. Not because we need more story, but because the desert has one more lesson to offer. How to close a day. The valley is dark, and the stars are steady. The cliffs are silhouettes again, their edges softened by distance. Somewhere, a faint breeze moves over the sand, making a sound so quiet it feels like a secret. In the valley, doors were covered by time, rubble and dust pulling over entrances like blankets. That covering was not violence, it was protection. And now you can do the same. You can cover the doorway of your day. Not with denial, but with gentleness. Imagine your tasks, your emails, your conversations, your unfinished plans as objects that can be placed in a wooden chest. One by one, set them inside, close the lid, not slamming, only closing. Then in your imagination, place a light cloth over the chest, like dust settling in the valley. It is safe there, it will still exist tomorrow, but tonight it does not need to be opened. Now return to the idea of Ren. The Egyptians believed that to be spoken kindly was to continue. They carved names so the world would remember. But tonight, the name you most need to remember is your own. Not for achievement, not for productivity, but for simple existence. You are here. You have made it to this night. You have carried your life this far. That is enough. If you want, give yourself one small internal sentence, soft as linen. May I rest now? Then let it dissolve. The desert wind does not hold on to words. It lets them pass. Your breathing can do the same. In, out. Now think again of the small lanterns we gathered, the copper mirror that reflects softly, the necklace of repeating beads, the game pieces shaped for quiet evenings, the amulets carried close to the heart, the mask that holds a calm face behind glass, and beneath them all, the idea that care can cross time. These lanterns do not need to stay bright. They can dim with you. They can become background warmth, like a nightlight in a hallway. A glow you do not need to stare at, only feel. If your mind tries to wake up with one more question, one more attempt to solve the world, let that question be answered by the simplest thing. Breathe. In, out. In, out. There is nowhere you have to go right now, no one you need to impress, no problem you must fix in the dark. The night is doing what it is meant to do, holding you while you let go. And if tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below when you are ready. If this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys. Now, in the next and final part, we will let the last lights dim completely. We will return the objects to silence, return the valley to shadow, and let your body drift into sleep as naturally as sand falling into place. For now, you can sink deeper into the mattress. Let your arms feel heavier, let your legs soften, let your chest rise and fall like a slow tide. Everything is being returned to its shelf, including you. There is a softness at the very end of a story when the last images are still in the air, but the mind is already drifting away from them. It is like the moment after you blow out a candle. There is a brief glow, a curl of warm smoke, and then the room belongs fully to night again. Tonight, we will let that happen. No rush, no sudden darkness, just a slow dimming like sand settling into a smooth slope. Imagine the museum one last time, but now the lights are almost gone. Only a faint, respectful glow remains, enough to say, everything is safe. Everything is held. The copper mirror rests in its case, no longer reflecting anyone's face. It does not need to. It has done what it was meant to do. It offered softness. It reminded us that we can look at ourselves gently. The necklace lies quiet, beads resting without movement. The amethyst holds twilight. The agate holds warmth. The hippopotamus amulet holds a small, sturdy humor, the kind of humor that belongs to ordinary life, the kind that says, even in the face of time, we are allowed to be human. The game pieces sit in their arranged patience, waiting for no one. They are simply proof that people once played and smiled in lamplight, that ancient evenings contained the same quiet comforts as ours. The amulets rest like tiny promises: wholeness, stability, life, symbols carried close to the heart. They remind us that protection can be quiet, and that a steady symbol can sometimes calm the mind more than any loud reassurance. And then the mask. It is still there, but now it is mostly shadow, like a moon behind thin cloud. In the dimness, it feels less like a public icon and more like a sleeping face, calm, closed-lipped, untroubled by the passing centuries. The pierced ears are not visible now, but their gentleness remains. A small human detail that once opened a question and now can simply rest as part of the whole. A face that traveled, a face that was held, a face that was cared for. In the quiet of the museum, the final light lowers again just a fraction, until the objects are no longer asking to be seen. They are simply resting. And now we leave them there with gratitude, because you do not have to keep the story awake. You can let it sleep. Imagine stepping out of the museum into the night air. Outside, the world is quieter than it was earlier. Even if you live in a busy place, night has a way of smoothing sound. Traffic becomes a distant hush. The city's edges soften. The sky, even if it is lit by streetlights, holds at least a few stars. Small, patient points that do not hurry. Now let the scene shift back to Egypt one last time, gently like a slow camera pan. The Nile at night. Dark water moving without effort. A boat in the distance perhaps, its lantern a small amber dot drifting across the surface. The oars dip. The river answers with a soft sigh. The air above the water is cooler, and it carries the faint scent of reeds. On the far bank, Luxor rests. On the west bank, the desert holds its valley. The Valley of the Kings is quiet now, the way a house is quiet when everyone has finally gone to bed. The limestone cliffs are shadow, the paths are empty. The entrances are dark mouths closed by time and stillness. If you imagine the tomb doorway we visited, it is covered again, rubble and dust like a blanket pulled up gently. Not to hide, not to punish, but to protect. The desert does not hoard in anger. It shelters in silence. This is the last lesson the valley gives us tonight. Covering is care. Closing is not loss. Closing is rest. And you can close your own day the same way. If there is something unresolved, an email unanswered, a worry unfinished, a problem that still does not have a solution, picture it like a small object placed on a shelf. You can return to it tomorrow. Tonight you do not have to carry it in your hands. Let your hands, whether they are on your blanket or by your sides, be empty now. Let your shoulders be empty. Let your mind be empty enough to breathe in and out. Now Ren, the name that breathes, returns one last time, not as a history lesson, but as a gentle blessing. The Egyptians believed that a name spoken kindly could keep someone present, that remembrance could be a soft form of life. Tonight you do not need to be remembered by crowds. You do not need to be famous to be real. You only need one kind voice. And tonight, that voice can be yours. If it feels right, speak your own name in your mind once, softly, warmly, the way you would speak to someone you love who has had a long day. Then follow it with a simple sentence, like a hand smoothing a blanket. You are safe enough to rest. And then let even that sentence go. Because sleep does not need many words. It needs rhythm. It needs permission. It needs softness. If you like, return to the lantern rhythm from earlier. Only now, the lantern is almost out. Inhale. The lantern glows faintly. Exhale. It dims. Inhale. Barely there. Exhale. Almost gone. With each breath, let your thoughts become fewer, like stars disappearing at dawn, not because they are gone, but because your attention is moving inward toward rest. Now notice your body, your forehead smoothing, your jaw heavy, your tongue resting, your shoulders sinking down, your chest rising and falling like a slow tide, your arms and legs becoming warm and weighty, as if gravity is a kind friend pulling you gently towards sleep. If a thought appears about tomorrow, about the past, about something small and sharp, let it be a grain of sand. It can slide off the ridge, it can settle, it does not need a conclusion. Sand does not argue with gravity, it simply finds rest. In, out. Now I will return the story's last lanterns to you in a final gentle sequence, one image for each slow breath. On the next inhale, imagine the copper mirror, warm and soft, reflecting only kindness. On the next exhale, imagine the necklace beads repeating and steady like distant rain. On the next inhale, imagine the cool stone corridor, safe and quiet, holding inscriptions like calm patterns. On the next exhale, imagine the desert, wide and patient, covering doorways with care. On the next inhale, imagine your name, resting inside a cartouche of gentle light. On the next exhale, imagine that light dimming into peaceful darkness. And now, nothing more needs to happen. No more scenes, no more questions. Only sleep, arriving the way it is meant to arrive. Quietly, without being chased. If you're still awake enough to hear this and this story brought you calm, leave a gentle comment for yourself when you're ready. If tonight's story reminded you of a beautiful memory, feel free to share it below. Don't forget to subscribe for more peaceful nighttime journeys. And now, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to hold on. You don't have to understand every detail. Just breathe, just sink, just let your eyes stay closed if they want to. Like a door closing softly, not a door that locks you out, but a door that brings you home.
Our story pauses here. Every visual and word you've experienced was assisted by AI, yet guided and perfected by sincere human emotion. We hope this harmony of history and technology has crafted a beautiful dream for you tonight. Let go and drift deep into sleep. Good night.